Hello and welcome back to HEMA Fight Breakdowns. Today we're going to be watching some footage from a HEMA fight that I am not in and did not attend and am unrelated to in every way. This is, in fact, of a friend of mine, Tanner Martin, versus somebody who I've never met before in Purple Heart Open in Texas. And what we're going to talk about today in this exchange is the concept of the hand push. Now, I've talked briefly in other videos about how forward pressure towards your opponent's hands is a great way of stifling any sort of counterattacks as you enter a grapple. But this is going to be slightly different, and this is, I think, the most effective anti-grappling, anti-clinch technique that exists in HEMA. And it's very effective because of how simple it is, how easy it is to set up, and how effective it can be at preventing someone from, even with an effective grapple game, from getting too close. So we're going to watch the exchange. Now, what I want to pay very, very close attention to here is the hand push that Tanner performs. So right here, a stab has been attempted. And as I say in other videos, every time you miss a stab, you're in a bad spot. The only thing you can really do is try to stop your own momentum and throw a follow-up cut, or just commit all the way and go for the grapple. And in this case, I believe the opponent maybe doesn't disconnect their hands fast enough, but basically goes into grapple range. Tanner takes a step forward in a very painful looking knee position, I might add, and lets go with his left hand, which you can barely see happening here before it gets obscured, and pushes both of his opponent's arms, but most importantly, his lead dominant arm, off to his left side while he pivots and turns. It essentially moves past his opponent while, delivering a strike. This is an absolutely wonderful tool for two reasons. One, for anyone who's done any kind of grappling at the sword, they know that the first thing that happens every time you enter grappling range is both people will disconnect their non-dominant hands and attempt to grapple the other person's dominant hand with it. And that's for a very good reason. 90% of the time, it's two right-handed people, which means that their non-dominant hand, their left hand, is directly in front of their opponent's right hand. So if you want to imagine two people standing basically square in front of each other like boxers, their lead hand correlates directly to the other person's sword hand, which means if you get all the way close enough to where you can both touch each other with both hands, you can both effectively wrap each other's dominant arm, their sword arm, and effectively prevent them from delivering a strike to you, while theoretically, hopefully, pulling your own sword arm back and delivering something. This hand push approaches the problem differently. What this hand push does is that when you disconnect your hands, while you turn toward your left in the direction of their lead arm, you're not just pushing their lead arm and their dominant sword arm out of the way, but you're intrinsically pulling your own sword arm back. Because of how you're rotating your hips and how you're turning your body, it's pretty much impossible not to keep your sword arm back. And what this does is, just here at this moment where they begin to pass each other, at no point does the person in blue here have the capability of let going with their left arm and effectively grabbing Tanner's sword. Because even if he tries to reach across his own body here, Tanner has pulled it back all the way to the level of his shoulder. After he finishes the hand push and they've gotten to the point where blue can no longer deliver any effective cuts, one, because a hand is on their arm putting pressure, which prevents them from moving it effectively, but also because they have all basically moved past each other to the point where Tanner almost has Nathan's back, and he can no longer deliver any sort of threat. At this point, Tanner delivers his counterstrike, which in this case gets blocked, but that's primarily because Tanner just did this reflexively and wasn't necessarily thinking about where he was going to be aiming. But the point still stands that in this extremely vulnerable state, all Nathan can do is block. And in fencing, any situation in which you can put yourself in where your opponent can only block and can only save themselves, that's an ideal position. There are often times where you can't control whether or not your follow-up strike is really going to land. Some people can always commit everything to parrying and get away with it. But what's important is that safe fencing requires you putting yourself in a position where your opponent cannot counterattack you no matter what. And grappling, in my opinion, is one of the few ways in which that actually happens. It's an important part of the art, and this hand push is something that literally anyone can do with virtually no wrestling background, no real training. All it takes is the willingness to step into a clinch, deny the clinch by pushing the arms, and throwing that follow-up.